Before I start, and I do feel like I have to address this, I am recording in my bedroom. The reason, if you live like in large chunks of the country right now, is that there is a big snowstorm, lots of ice. No one can leave the house, which means my kids are home, which means they have taken over downstairs. And so this is the only quiet place left where I live. And so that's where we're recording. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can see various items I have around me, a home pod, some Oxford cloth button-down shirts. And if you are on Reels or TikTok, you can't see those things, which is why you should head over to YouTube sometime to get the full frame experience of one of these videos. That's all. Just I felt like I had to mention that. I'm not here to talk about my bedroom. I'm here to talk about the Trump administration's operation in Minnesota. Today there was some news. President Trump put out a statement on, I believe, Truth Social or X or whatever social network he uses, where he says that he had a nice talk with Governor Tim Walz and that they're coming to some kind of resolution. This to me reads as the beginning of a de-escalation from the administration, the closest you're going to get to Trump saying that we lost. But before we discuss that any further, it is worth asking, well, what would a victory look like for the Trump administration? Which raises this larger question, right? What was the strategic purpose of the operation in Minnesota? Because consider it just from an objective operational standpoint. They have committed thousands of ICE and Customs and Border Protection agents to Minnesota and specifically the Twin Cities. A large portion of ICE's total manpower is currently working in Minnesota right now. They have sent high-ranking officials of the administration, Greg Bovino from Customs and Border Protection, the Vice President, J.D. Vance. They're sending Tom Homans, who is the Homeland Security czar, into Minnesota. In the face of the killings of Renee Good and this past weekend, Alex Preddy, they have doubled down on their commitment to the use of aggressive force and violence in the area. It's not even once taking any kind of out, either rhetorically or in terms of public opinion. And it should be said that the administration does need public opinion. Authoritarian rule is actually quite fragile. And in places where it's durable, the regimes there pay careful attention to what the public thinks. It's not hard to imagine an alternate response to either the Good killing or the Preddy killing from the administration. You offer your condolences, you promise an investigation, you get a scalp of some sort, Jonathan Ross, the officer involved in the Good killing, or the officer involved in the Preddy killing who they haven't revealed. You might even get Bovino, who goes out there kind of making a fool of himself and digging the hole deeper for the administration.
Dan, at first he was there in the scene. He was in the scene actively impeding and assaulting law enforcement to the point.
But that's not illegal. He wasn't
Dana,
impeding it. He was filming it, which is a legal thing to do in the United States of America.
Dana, let's don't freeze frame adjudicate this now.
Either way, you get a scalp, you promise an investigation, you send your condolences, and then you pull back a little bit. You become less aggressive, recognizing that the public will only support any kind of aggressive immigration action if they feel that it's happening in good faith. And if they don't, they'll probably turn against it, which is what's happening right now. But the White House, Trump, Miller, Noem, did not take this path. We know which path they took. They doubled down. They became even more aggressive. They sent J.D. Vance out to defend the kidnapping of a 5-year-old.
So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do?
They labeled both Good and Preddy domestic terrorists.
This was an act of domestic terrorism, which is perpetuating.
No investigation into who she was or what she was about.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism.
Accusing them of wanting to perpetrate violence against ICE agents, even though we can see with our own eyes that they were doing nothing of the sort. If events offered them the opportunity to pull back and recover their position with the public, they did the opposite, asserting their right to use violence against whomever they please, and committing themselves to further repression. And the effect of this, as we could see again on the ground in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and the larger metro area, is that people just got angrier. They became even more defiant, more unwilling to back down. It's to the point now where ICE essentially cannot operate without being trailed by dozens of people. Every escalation from the administration, in other words, has been met with extremely effective resistance from the public at large. And this was completely predictable. You didn't have to be Nostradamus or Negrodamus.
For centuries, people have turned to one man for the answer to life's great mysteries. That man is Negrodamus.
To figure this one out, So I return to my initial question. What was the strategic purpose of all of this? And I think I have an answer. It boils down to how the administration conceptualizes power. Now, we've already discussed on this page how the administration rejects the notion of soft power. They see it, in the words of one prominent right-wing influencer, as weak and gay. They reject soft power entirely. Instead, the only kind of power they seem to understand, the only thing they seem to be able to wrap their hands around, is the use of force, the application of violent pressure. In international affairs, that's tariffs in order to get what you want. That's the threat of military action to get what you want. They've taken more or less the identical approach at home. They see that they have political opponents. They see that there is real opposition to their immigration plans, to their deportation plans, to their detention plans. But rather than try to maneuver around this opposition through the use of soft power, they have decided, and when I say they, I really do mean Stephen Miller in particular, has decided to suppress that opposition. They're going to use force to make people get in line, to cow the public. They're going to use force to demonstrate their ability to terrorize you into compliance. They targeted Minneapolis for contingent reasons, right? These accusations of fraud, the fact that Tim Walz was on the opposing ticket, the fact that it's symbolic not just of the successful integration of immigrants into a traditional American community, but also symbolic of 2020, where the killing of George Floyd happened. And one thing is clear, that at least psychologically, the administration is obsessed with the conditions of 2020 and very much want to do a replay or have and very much want a do-over of 2020. They want to use the force now that they didn't use then. We can discuss that in a separate video. Minneapolis has this symbolic value for the administration, but it's also a proving ground for this theory that the application of force, the suppression of the opposition, will not just keep them in line, but will keep everyone in line. The fear of force will keep everyone in line.
Fear will keep the local systems in line.
And so to extend that reference a little further, the strategic goal of the administration in Minneapolis is basically identical to the strategic goal of the empire, the Galactic Empire, when it destroyed Alderaan. To demonstrate its willingness to use force and to keep everyone else in line. But in the same way that the destruction of Alderaan just rallied wavering systems to the rebellion, the operation in Minnesota has really done nothing else but to turn the public against the administration.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
And to move large numbers of ordinary people as well as political elites from a position of, oh, we can deal with or negotiate with this administration, to a position of we have to beat this administration at all costs and dismantle its work in agencies like ICE and the Customs and Border Protection. It's radicalized the administration's opposition in addition to giving it far more resolve, which makes the operation not just a profound strategic failure, but something like a strategic reversal. The White House is weaker now than it was before it began this. And the basic issue for the White House will continue to be that the relevant people in it, the principal actors, have no conception of what it looks like to back down or to de-escalate or to find some other option. They really only understand force. The gentle application of power in the wake of either the Good or Preddy killing might have diffused some of this. I'm thinking now of the civil rights movement's defeat in Albany, Georgia, where the sheriff there, Laurie Pritchett, did not engage in the kind of ostentatious repression of marchers and demonstrators. Instead, he quietly arrested them, quietly took King to jail, explained himself in terms that the press understood and could even sympathize with. And the result is that the movement could not get any traction. It was, again, a defeat. But they did learn something from that defeat. When they began planning their next operation, they looked specifically for cities where there would be violent and thuggish opposition, the kind of opposition that would generate sympathy from the public at large. And they found it in Birmingham.
On May 3rd, 1963, hundreds more children began to march. Commissioner of Public Safety Eugene Bull Connor ordered police and firemen to attack the children with high-pressure hoses, batons, and police dogs. Images of the children being brutally assaulted by the police appeared on television and in newspapers across the country and world, provoking global outrage.
It is striking that our current crop of reactionaries lack the strategic savvy of a bunch of segregationists in 1961, but it is to our advantage that they don't have that savvy. or to our advantage if you are opposed to them. If you are for them, then first of all, don't know why you're watching this channel, but second of all, you should reconsider your position. To sum this up, I think the Minnesota operation demonstrates that the Trump administration does not know how to do anything but apply the most brute force to a problem, does not know how to apply soft power, does not have the operational capacity to deal with real resistance, and is incapable of responding flexibly to new developments on the ground. It is rigid and brittle, and has handed itself a major self-inflicted defeat. And the other thing is that there's no sign that they're going to get any more popular going forward. Right now may be the high watermark for popularity for Trump this year. And as we get closer to November, I'm going to make a prediction, and that is you're going to see a lot of Republicans begin to get extremely nervous about what it's going to mean after November, when the consequences of this unpopularity and if this authoritarian style of governance really begins to catch up with them. And it will. That I'm actually pretty confident of.